On to Burkina Faso now. There's an interesting story of success from the auto sector there. Specifically, the release of a new electric vehicle produced by a local manufacturer is being hailed as an interesting move for a country that's been more synonymous with subsistence agriculture, conflict and political unrest, especially of late. Now, while much of the country will not be able to afford these units outright, experts say it could lead to an economic...
In a time when headlines often revolve around war, corruption, or collapse, few would have expected one of Africa's smallest landlocked nations to become a symbol of bold reconstruction. But something rare is happening in Burkina Faso. By the end of 2022, the country was grappling with insecurity, poverty, and a faltering economy. Then came a quiet but seismic shift. A young leader named Captain Ibrahim Traoré assumed power. Many feared yet another strongman. But what followed wasn't bombast or chaos. It was brick, steel, and strategy. Within 3 years, the country witnessed a development surge unlike anything seen in its modern history. From rural roads to urban airports, from cashew processing to electric car manufacturing, a new kind of nation was emerging, one built with urgency and ownership. There were no fireworks, no parades, just action. Flight of sovereignty. On October 2, 2024, a passenger jet painted in Burkina Faso's red, green, and gold lifted off from Ouagadougou International Airport. But this wasn't just a commercial flight. It was the symbolic rebirth of Air Burkina, the nation's defunct airline, now resurrected under the name Ibina. One aircraft, 190 seats, $19 million, quietly purchased through bilateral negotiations with China. The flight connected the capital to Harka and then to Bamako. There was no grand media campaign, but for the citizens who boarded that plane, it meant more than just travel. It meant belonging, control, visibility. It was proof that Burkina Faso could once again write its own script in the sky. Cashew, not just a crop. In the sun-baked south, another kind of engine roared to life. Cashew nuts, once exported raw and cheaply, were now being processed domestically for the first time. A modern factory launched under Traoré's administration turned the humble nut into an emblem of transformation. More than 20,000 jobs were created directly, up to 50,000 indirectly. For a country where youth unemployment was once considered an immovable burden, this single plant brought hope. It wasn't just about machines or exports, it was about redefining value. Local farmers were no longer mere suppliers. They were partners in a national vision. Burkina Faso stopped exporting potential. Instead, it began exporting products. Banking the forgotten. Not all revolutions are loud. On October 7, 2024, the Burkina Faso Postal Bank, BPPF, quietly opened its doors, a project conceived decades ago but never realized until now. With an initial capital of $25 million, the bank was built not for the elite, but for the underserved, women, farmers, youth, rural entrepreneurs. This wasn't a place for corporate loans or foreign investment portfolios. It was a place where a widow could save, a young farmer could borrow, and a market vendor could dream a little bigger. President Traoré didn't call it a bank. He called it a doorway, a place not to imagine riches but to begin something real, weaving pride. Back into the nation clothing has always been political, and in Burkina Faso, wearing Western second-hand garments had long been normalized. That changed. Under Traoré, the government banned second-hand clothing imports and reignited the nation's dormant textile sector. New factories were built. School uniforms were crafted from Faso d'Anfani, the country's indigenous cloth. Even military and police uniforms were stitched domestically. In courtrooms, lawyers now wear traditional African attire instead of colonial-era wigs. The message was clear. Burkina Faso would no longer dress in the cast-offs of others. The revival of the garment industry wasn't about fashion. It was about identity, ownership, national pride, a cultural reclamation woven into every seam. Airports with strategy, not show, in Bobo Dioulasso, Burkina Faso's second city, a once neglected airport, is undergoing a full transformation. With an investment of over 80 billion CFA francs, the dusty airstrip is becoming a major regional hub, a new terminal, improved runways, road infrastructure, all built with the vision of positioning Burkina Faso on the continental aviation map. And it doesn't stop there. A second international airport is rising 35 kilometers outside the capital, Ouagadougou Donin International. It will be the most sustainable transport hub the country has ever seen. Built with low-carbon concrete, it includes a 25-megawatt solar power plant and advanced energy storage systems. But even more significant is what it symbolizes, that Burkina Faso is building for tomorrow, not just reacting to yesterday. Agriculture becomes becomes a profession. For decades, farming was considered a fallback for the poor. Now, under Traoré, it's a career path. In late 2024, more than 400 tractors, thousands of motorcycles, tons of fertilizer and modern irrigation tools were handed over, not sold, to farmers and cooperatives across the country. Simultaneously, the government launched a $200 million agricultural training program for 20,000 young people. These weren't theoretical classes. Participants received land, seeds, and resources to start real farms. It was a national mobilization. From smart farming barges to aquaculture feed systems, agriculture began to look less like survival and more like innovation, reclaiming the weave of history. Back in the capital, another change was unfolding, this one in stone. The Thomas Sankara Memorial, named after the revolutionary leader assassinated in 1987, is being rebuilt on the very soil where he fell. Not as a shrine to the past, but as a declaration of a future inspired by Sankara's original dream, an Africa united, self-reliant, and proud. An 87-meter tower will anchor the memorial, 1 meter for each year since Sankara's death. The structure, designed by acclaimed architect Francis Keir, aims to tell the story not of a martyrdom, but of a legacy rekindled. A few years ago, few would have imagined Burkina Faso becoming a country known for infrastructure. For decades, it ranked among the least developed in the world, landlocked, underfunded, and largely ignored. But under the steady hand of Captain Ibrahim Traoré, that narrative is being rewritten with stunning speed and determination. This is not a story of miracles, it's a story of momentum, of thousands of small steps taken without fanfare, but with clarity. And nowhere is this more evident than in the country's aggressive approach to road development, from broken roads to a national network. In 1960, when Burkina Faso gained independence, it had just over 3,600 kilometers of paved roads. Over the next 60 years, that number barely changed. But in 2023, Traoré made a bold announcement. The country would build 50,000 kilometers of new roads by the end of the decade. Most didn't believe him, not because it was impossible, but because nothing like it had ever been attempted without foreign contractors. But Traoré made it clear. This time, it would be Burkinabe hands that built their future. Over 900 pieces of construction equipment were purchased. Thousands of engineers, machine operators, and surveyors were trained. Roads began cutting through forests, linking towns once forgotten, and reconnecting regions long isolated. Every road didn't just move traffic, it moved people towards hospitals, schools, and jobs, and in the process, it built something deeper: trust. A port without a coastline. Being landlocked has always been Burkina Faso's Achilles heel. Importing goods meant relying on coastal neighbors. Exporting products often took weeks, if not months. But now, that's changing. In Bobo Dioulasso, a $253 million dry port is under construction. Unlike traditional ports, this inland hub will function as a full logistics and customs center, receiving goods from ports in Ghana and Côte d'Ivoire and distributing them across West Africa. The strategy is clear. If the sea won't come to Burkina Faso will reach the sea in its own way. And through that mindset, what was once considered a disadvantage is being turned into a new form of economic leverage. Burkina Faso's education crisis was no secret. Millions of children grew up without books, proper classrooms, or even the chance to attend school. Under Traoré, the government decided to do more than talk about reform. It decided to deliver it. In June 2024, a 5-year national education plan was unveiled. The cornerstone: completely free education from primary school to university. No fees, no barriers. To make education real, the government began building. 250 schools reopened in conflict zones, 44 new secondary schools, 39 university lecture halls, 10 vocational training centers, and the curriculum itself was reimagined. It no longer focused solely on rote memorization, but instead added technical training, civic education, and practical life skills. Education became more than a right. It became the tool with which a generation could redraw the future. For decades, every drop of fuel consumed in Burkina Faso was shipped from coastal countries. The cost was high, the delays were long, the country's energy security depended entirely on foreign goodwill. But in 2024, that began to change when Burkina Faso purchased the Tema oil port in Ghana for $70 million. For the first time in its history, the country owned a coastal access point for fuel imports. Soon after, a new hydrocarbon storage center was built in western Burkina Faso. With a capacity of over 100,000 cubic meters, it increased the country's reserves and ensured that, for the first time, shortages would no longer define the energy supply chain. No more panic at the pumps, no more foreign bottlenecks. Fuel sovereignty had become a reality. While most nations are still debating the risks of nuclear energy, Burkina Faso signed one of Africa's boldest deals. In July 2023, during talks with Russian President Vladimir Putin, Traoré's administration secured a $4 billion agreement with Rosatom to build the country's first nuclear power plant. The goal? Electricity for 90% of urban homes and 50% of rural areas by 2030. It's ambitious. But unlike fossil fuels, nuclear energy provides long-term stability. The project also includes training programs, technology transfers, and community education to ensure the technology is not only installed, but understood. For a country where fewer than 1 in 5 people had consistent electricity access just a few years ago, this is more than a power plant. It's a declaration that Burkina Faso refuses to settle for candlelight in the 21st century. Back in the heart of the capital, a place once filled with silence is finally echoing with remembrance. In 1987, President Thomas Sankara, Burkina Faso's most iconic revolutionary, was assassinated. For decades, the site where he fell remained untouched, a scar that had never fully healed. But today, a towering 10,000 square meter memorial is rising in his honor. Designed by world-renowned architect Francis Keir, the structure features an 87-meter monument honoring the 5 revolutionaries who died that day. This isn't nostalgia, it's continuity, a bridge between the ideals of the past and the actions of the present. At the same time, Traoré's administration has begun building for another overlooked group, the elderly. Burkina Faso is now constructing its first geriatric hospital in Bobo Dioulasso. With a budget of over 1.7 billion CFA francs, the initiative includes free health checkups, medication support, and expanded welfare programs for tens of thousands of retired citizens. In a world obsessed with youth, Traoré chose to build for those who carried the nation through its hardest years. You can't build a country if you can't make your own cement. That's why in May 2025, the Xiang Longo cement plant opened its gates in Plateau Central. The plant, a joint venture with Chinese investors, can produce 10,000 tons of cement per day, enough to meet the infrastructure demands of the entire nation. It's not just a production facility, it's a statement. The plant runs on renewable energy, recycles used cement sacks, and incorporates modern emission control systems. Thousands of jobs have been created. But more importantly, the days of importing overpriced cement from foreign markets are over. Burkina Faso is now building with its own hands, its own dust, and its own pride. In Burkina Faso, the transformation isn't confined to cities, factories, or schools. It's unfolding in every corner of the country, in remote villages and border towns, in workshops and on train tracks, in gold mines and community clinics. Each project launched by President Ibrahim Traoré reveals a single unifying principle. Burkina Faso will build itself, for itself, and perhaps no sector better reflects that than energy, transport, and healthcare. What happens when a country long dismissed as technologically behind decides to challenge the stereotype? In 2025, the answer came in the form of Italo, Burkina Faso's first fully locally manufactured electric vehicle. Designed, engineered, and assembled in the capital city, Italo wasn't just a product, it was a message. 2 models, Native and Sil, were unveiled to the public. Each vehicle can travel over 330 kilometers on a single 30-minute charge. They're equipped with Bluetooth, GPS, and even solar charging options, practical for the mix of rural and urban roads across the country. But more than innovation, Italo represented confidence. It wasn't built with imported kits or foreign branding. It was made from the ground up by Burkinabe hands, proving that a country doesn't need to follow the world. It can lead its own way forward. For decades, Burkina Faso's provinces had no rail links. Movement across the country was slow, expensive, and often dangerous. Trucks overburdened crumbling roads, logistics collapsed during rainy seasons, trade was stifled. So Traoré revived a bold idea, FRAER, a national railway project to stitch together the country's economic and geographic fabric. FRAER is more than tracks and stations. It's an entire logistics strategy. Dedicated lanes for agriculture, mineral extraction, and passenger movement. Each train will act as a lifeline, linking remote villages to trade hubs, giving farmers access to markets, and reconnecting the forgotten. Steel rails, laid across dry earth, now carry the weight of a country's ambitions. Burkina Faso is one of the continent's top gold producers, yet for years the people saw little from it. Gold was dug up, exported raw, and refined abroad. The country earned dust while value evaporated overseas. That changed in 2023. President Traoré nationalized 2 major gold mines, Bongo and Gawa, and established the state-owned mining company, Soramib. New agreements were signed directly with Russian firms, cutting out decades of middlemen and exploitation. Even more transformative, the construction of Burkina Faso's first gold refinery in partnership with Marinag, with a capacity of 150 tons per year. Already, over 5,000 indirect jobs have been created. Gold is no longer an export-only asset. It's a national resource. mined, refined, and protected by the very people who own the land it came from. Health in Burkina Faso has long been a crisis of distance. Hospitals were far, specialists were few, equipment was outdated. But step by step, the country is turning this around. 2 university hospitals are under construction, one in Banfora with 500 beds, built in partnership with China, one in Gawa with 300 beds covering the southwest and parts of Ghana. In parallel, 15 solar-powered mobile clinics are now crisscrossing the country equipped with ultrasound machines, endoscopy tools, and even refrigeration units for vaccines. They're reaching villages that never had medical professionals. The government has also built 55 new community health centers, 5 intensive care units. Each center is a piece of a system. Together they form a net, catching people before they fall too far, too sick, too hopeless. In Traoré's words, a hospital is not just a building, it is a way to restore trust. In many places, clean water used to be a dream. Children trekked kilometers to draw muddy water. Sanitation was a word, not a reality. But now, that's changing. With support from the African Development Bank, Burkina Faso launched a national clean water campaign. 60 mobile water systems, 110 large-capacity storage tanks, over 13,500 household toilets. This is not glamorous development. There are no grand speeches about boreholes, but for the 500,000 people who now drink safely, bathe with dignity, and live disease-free, it means everything. When your morning begins with clean water, your entire future feels possible. In the capital stands the August 4th Stadium, named after the date of Thomas Sankara's revolution in 1983. For years it decayed, an echo of past glory. But today, it's alive again. The stadium now holds 35,000 people, upgraded with international quality turf, LED lighting, digital screens, and VIP areas. It is no longer just a football pitch. It is the beating heart of a nation that refuses to be forgotten. During matches, music festivals, or national celebrations, thousands rise to sing the anthem. The stadium has become more than concrete. It is now pride, joy, and memory, reborn. This is not the end. It's the beginning. Across this country, 25 transformative projects have launched in just 3 years. Schools, airports, mines, roads, banks, clinics, ports, and not by accident. There was no miracle, just vision, discipline, and the refusal to keep waiting for outside permission. While some nations borrow blueprints, Burkina Faso is writing its own. And that's what makes it matter, not just for Burkinabe people, but for any society wondering what's possible when leaders believe in their people more than foreign solutions. Burkina Faso has made its choice, to rise without apology, to reclaim what it owns, to build with what it has. And slowly the world is watching, not with pity but with respect. If this story moved you, tell us in the comments, which part inspired you the most? What does it mean to rise on your own terms? Like this video to support independent reporting. Subscribe for more stories about nations daring to define their own future. And if you believe in the power of self-reliance, type Africa Rises in the comments. Thank you for staying with us. Until next time, stay informed, stay inspired, and never underestimate a people who decide to build for themselves.